Like Winnie the Pooh, we often think that bees are making honey for us, but this is not so. Honey in the first place is their own survival food, and they need this food for lasting them through the winter. It's not just sweet stuff. Nutritionally, it's much better than plain sugar. And this is why the practice of taking all of the honey from the bees, something that many beekeepers do, and then feeding them sugar syrup instead in the fall, is something that compromises their health. They are more likely to have diarrhea. The processing of sugar in the fall will weaken them, and they will have to spend their resources that are required for lasting the winter on just turning the sugar water into something that would be palatable for them. So I never do that. I don't recommend that you swap all of the honey for sugar water, because nutritionally these are very different things. If you treat your bees with respect, you need to recognize that honey belongs to them first, and you can certainly help yourself to whichever surplus they don't need and won't be able to consume on their own. If you know anything about how conventional beekeeping is done, you will notice that harvesting that late in the season, we're mid-October now here in Missouri, is very unusual, but it's actually the most bee-friendly way of harvesting honey, because by delaying the harvest until this point of time, we make sure that bees were well fed during the entire summer. If there was the dearth, if they couldn't harvest in the fields, they always had a reserve stockpile in the hives to fall back on during the summer. And now that it's the very end of the season, we know exactly how much we can take from them without compromising their safety during the winter.
So patience is a virtue. I love it, I love it.
Several other reasons why I like harvesting honey late in the season is there are significantly fewer bees here now than there were 2 months ago. And the ones that are here in the box, because of the very cold nights, they already start preparing for the winter and go into their brood chamber forming a cluster. So much less disturbance, significantly fewer bees. And not only that, the honey that was there during the summer had all the time to ripen and to be much high quality, ready to be extracted now than it would be if it was in the middle of the active season.
So actually, like wine, the longer you let the honey stay in the hive, the better it is?
Yeah, because if you look at what honey is, it's nectar processed by the bees. They don't just evaporate moisture from it to turn it into honey. They also add enzymes to it to work their magic. And the longer you leave the honey in the hive, the more complete the process is. Still another reason to this time of year, you can do the honey harvest, the final check of the year, and winterizing all in one visit.
Right.
Again, minimizing disturbance. If we were to do it earlier, we would need to come back to the bee yard to winterize the bees. But here we can do everything right at the same moment, as described in Keeping Bees with a Smile book, and also in Keeping Bees with Horizontal Hives, the two classical books on natural beekeeping and hives like this one. It's a rule of thumb that you want to leave, depending on your climate, anywhere between 30 and 50 pounds of honey in a horizontal hive, and it's very easy to estimate. A full frame this size, it's called the Layens frame, when full of honey, it's 8 pounds, between 8 and 9 pounds. So if the frame is partially filled with honey like this next one, you can just estimate that this one is probably between 3 and 4 pounds of honey. Here we go, we start removing the surplus honey. Again, any frames that have only a small amount of honey in the top we need to remove, because if the bees cluster on these frames, they're likely to run out of these small stores on this frame, and then they may starve on this frame. So we're looking at frames that are at least 5, 6, 8 inches of honey on the top to leave for the bees for the winter. So this one has a little honey on one side and more nectar here, and no honey on this side, so this we will remove. It's important not just to leave them what they need to survive during the cold months, but also for the spring. For example, if we were to leave this frame in the hive, they won't touch it during the winter. They will have enough on the other frames. But if the spring weather is unfavorable for foraging, it's too rainy or too cold, they would have this reserve there to consume during this inclement weather. So it's a very good practice to be leaving bees with enough food, not just for the winter, but for the first month of the spring.
Hello and welcome to a new video. It is now early October, which marks the end to a very interesting and peculiar summer and honey flow season here in Nova Scotia. If you watched my previous video called Summertime, you will know that I mentioned that we had a very dry and hot summer, and this trend continued all the way into now, early October. In fact, it's been what people call a historically dry summer throughout the whole maritime area of Atlantic Canada. With that, I am now sharing the final inspection of the hive from October the 7th, in which I'm looking for how far the bees were able to draw comb across the 25 frames that were installed, and whether I can harvest a little bit of honey or not. So what you can see here is that I've removed the last two frames of the 25 frames Layens Hive, frames number 25 and 24, which are both empty, so the bees did not reach that far. And as I work my way backwards, I noticed that the bees made it as far as frame number 16. And I'm removing frames 17 to 25 because they will not stay in the hive over the winter. There will be a division board placed behind the last frame that stays in the hive. So I'm switching the camera here to show you the back end of frame number 16, which happens to be one of the 2 or 3 frames that I equipped with a full sheet of wax foundation. All other frames were given sheets of or strips of wax foundation. Here we notice a very interesting development. I'm holding frame number 15, which, as you can tell, has capped honey on one side and does not have capped honey on the other side. It is interesting because it relates back to the previous video, which refers to the second summer hive inspection I conducted on July the 31st. And we're going to do a quick rewind to that exact inspection. Because as you can see here, on July 31st, the bees had drawn comb on frames 1 to 15. And here I'm taking out frame number 15, the one you just looked at. And interestingly, you can see that at that time, the frame had capped honey on both sides. Which means, or lets me conclude, that because of the dry conditions we've been having here throughout July and August as well as September, the bees were not able to expand the drawing of comb beyond frame number 16, and also they must have used up some stored resources from frame number 15, because there's less capped honey on that frame now than there was 9 weeks ago. This is why I also shared the information from Dr. Leo's video, in which he explains why it is advisable to not harvest lots of honey at the peak of summer, so that bees during dearth periods have reserves to fall back to. I believe that is exactly what happened here this summer with this colony. I wasn't sure what to expect when I opened the hive, and I had to make a decision on how to proceed given that the situation was what it was. What I decided to do was to inspect the next 3 frames, which were frames number 14, 13, and 12, and use the guidance provided by Dr. Leo with regards to the depth of the capped honey, and use those frames as harvest frames. That's basically harvesting 20% of the frames of this colony, and perhaps a little less in terms of percentage of total honey, because frames 1 to 11 that are staying in the hive have the most amount of capped honey on them. Frame number 11 was halfway covered in capped honey. And because of the way the bees filled the frames from left to right throughout the honey flow season, the assumption is that all other frames have at least the same or more amount of capped honey on them. Okay, in this part here, I'm weighing the 3 frames I decided to harvest. I just wanted to see what the approximate weight is per frame. Here you can see frame number 14 coming out at 4.4 pounds, and the other 2 frames weighing in at 4.9 pounds each. I did a separate weighing of an empty frame without any foundation or comb, which came in at about 240 grams, which is about half a pound. So give or take, each of the 3 harvested frames is about 4 pounds of a mix of wax and honey. Then the next step was to crush and strain the honeycomb. I don't have an extractor yet because I only have a small harvest this year, and I knew that. So I wanted to just manually apply this method to you basically crush the entire comb into whatever strainer it is that you're using, and then separate therefore the wax and the honey. And it's a very easy method. It's a little bit messy, but also very enjoyable to do. It gets you very close to the product. There's plenty of little bits and pieces of leftovers to try. And obviously, there is a loss of the foundation for next season, but because I only harvested 3 frames, that's okay. For next year, I'm going to look into having an extractor to preserve the foundation for the hives for the future. Yeah, but here you can see me just using a wooden spatula to gradually take apart the comb. You can also just cut along the wires of the frame and just remove the comb entirely that way, and then crush it in whichever strainer you use. So here you see basically the final product of what the wax looks like, and then the extracted honey. I let that sit overnight to just let all the honey go through the process of gravity, and then the next and last step was to basically bottle the harvested honey and obviously enjoy the most delicious product that the bees created, which was an absolute delight. Okay, I think there is a good amount of information in this video. It's sometimes a little difficult to condense everything I want to say for each of the steps involved into this kind of video format. I might change the format for future videos and do like a YouTube live, because it's a bit more straightforward to communicate different ideas and not have to do the editing and the separate audio recording. But all of that aside, I want to mention a few more things. First of all, sugar syrup. This colony was given a total of 3 liters, 3 1-liter jars of sugar syrup at the very beginning of when I installed the colony early June, because they were brand new, coming to a new home, a new hive with new foundations, and the beekeeping supply store that I got them from said that I must do that, and I don't think there's any issue with that. Since then, they were given 0 sugar syrup. The bees were also not treated with any chemicals whatsoever. That is part of the fundamental approach of natural beekeeping. And time will tell how that does or doesn't affect the colony's health and future colonies that will be part of this apiary. And lastly, the honey. It's hard to put into words what it means to receive such a gift from a local colony of honeybees that you look after. The gift they provide is not a product, it's really a medicine. And knowing that it's of pure quality, I think that's what it's all about. So with that, I'll leave you with the stars of the show themselves, the honeybees. And I thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos to come in the future and to see what comes next. Thanks so much. Take care.